Okay, everybody, we're about to start the next presentation, so we could kind of settle down, and we're going to let my good friend and author, Bradley Thomas, who has written numerous books, very thick compendiums of incredible extra biblical and canonical material. And he's got a very interesting story to share with you. Like myself, he understands the Genesis 3, the separation of the bloodlines, and he, along with Dr. Joy, were confirming witness to me in my walk, and they were two of the witnesses that came forth, which the Most High put us in contact with one another. And he also has the understanding that the separation, the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, that this is physical, and that there is a physical progeny connected to the wicked one here on the earth, and they are those that are hiding behind the scenes like Oz behind the mask to work and bring forth the New World Order as the system by which to introduce the Antichrist. And so Brett will be speaking about those things as well. So if you would, please welcome Bradley Thomas.
Thank you for that nice.
You're welcome, brother. Here you go.
I have a mic.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. You know, when they asked me to do this, I really wasn't sure which topic I would choose, and the Lord kept giving me Rome and the seven-headed beast. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, Lord. As Zen said, my passion is more towards Genesis 3:15, the serpent seed, etc. So I decided to take a go at it, and here we go. Many of us already know the details about, early Genesis and the Garden of Eden, the flood of Noah, etc., Tower of Babel. And what I do in my books is I use as many alternative texts as I could to just highlight some of these stories, because I believe there's a lot more to them than either it's in the original biblical text or that we've been told. So all these additional bits of information does seem to help almost to understand what these stories might really mean and what they're really about. In this presentation, though, I will be highlighting one particular city, and I just got a little fascinated with it because it just, over time, seems to have such a significance in the end times, all throughout its history. And it's not Babylon, believe it or not, hence the name of my books. But rather, this city would carry on, like I said, on a huge scale, the spirit of its Babylonian predecessors. This time I'm talking about the infamous city of Rome. How many of you have ever been there? It's quite a place. Any go up onto one of the 7 hills? Yeah, I did too. It's amazing. And a lot of history there. Maybe a little too much for our liking, but this one city, over time, has become the antithesis of ancient Israel and a whole number of Jewish people and Protestants alike. My question is why? Well, what's in a name, anyhow? Curiously, the city of Rome, from its inception, seems to have a number of unique qualities about her, it seems, at least according to me, putting her almost in a class by herself. Beyond being known as that eternal city, or city of majesty, it seems that they have quite a history with the children of Israel, as I'll try to explain here. We also know that it was the Romans who ruled over Israel at the time of Christ, and he was crucified on a Roman cross, and the Romans were also the ones who tried to crush and scatter all the remaining Israelites in the land. Yes, they seemed quite a nemesis. As Babylon, that one great pagan stronghold, began to disintegrate, Rome seemed ready and able to step up and take over the ancient reins of pagan control and manipulation here and hold on to it. In the volumes I've written quite a bit about another nemesis of Israel, the people of Edom. They were the people who obviously, as most of you know, sprung from Esau, the brother of Jacob. Many of us may already know the story about the strife between the two and their descendants, the fight over the birthright, the love of their father Isaac, what have you. And if we really think about it, these confrontations have continued still, even up to today, even though we may be kind of blind to what's really going on. Curiously, there are a vast number of Jews out there that, to this present day, still think Rome is the modern manifestation of Edom. And I agree to a degree. In my next third volume, I will be digging deeper into these topics, but for now, why would a number of these individuals associate Rome with ancient Edom? And why did Rome end up being such an antithesis towards the children of Israel? Well, the first hint we have has to do with Esau's grandson, Zepho, by which, according to the book of Jasher, we had him heading into this ancient area, along with a few of his confederates, and sizing up the people into becoming great warriors. Yes, he seemed to be that spark behind a lot of the city and how it was transformed into such a military force. Of course, Zepho had high hopes that the city and the people would return some favors to him and help him do some of his bidding. And who do you think Zepho might want to pick out as one of his most noble enemies? Of course, the children of Israel. Beyond these early Edomite influences, though, there seem to be other elements to ancient Rome which may be of interest to our discussion here. Let's go a little bit farther back to the times just after the flood. Some of these sources are a little obscured that help me find out some information here, not like Aeneas and the travels of Noah into Europe, but they're fascinating, at least to me. So as time went on, after the flood, paganism, polytheism, whatever you call it, it was beginning to creep back into the post-flood world, into a person's everyday life, causing many of them to unite at the Tower of Babel. Their unification project, of course, made God very angry here. He was not about to allow this sacrilege to continue. So, as most of us know, he caused the people to separate. It was also about this time when vast numbers of people just wanted to live out their own lives in the new areas they were designated to. And these new areas were most often something of Noah's direction and plan. Yes, he became instrumental in assigning people where to go, it seemed, after the flood. And because of this, Noah didn't want to just really sit around after the flood planting vines and drinking wine. He actually traveled abroad, trying to help these relocated people adjust to their new lives and wanted them to live according to God's will most often and most importantly. At least twice, he was said to have left this area where he settled right after the flood, and because of this, he became a great symbolic father to many. So, if we think of him being the wine connoisseur the Bible hints to, he eventually wanted to stay in one area now known as the Italian Peninsula. Good wine country, huh? Good, go figure. Yes, after the Second World Tour, Noah decided to make this area home all the way up to his death. He, as well, wanted to keep this area a solid moral outpost under God as well. Being in this situation, though, he must have been a very good man with great compassion for all the people after the flood, even though the pagan threat was still on the rise everywhere. With this kind of father figure, you could only imagine the compassion and love he had for his own children and his own family, especially. But, of course, some of the more vile of his descendants knew how he was and tried to take advantage of him. Ham, most of us know Ham, who study the Bible, the son of Noah, the drunkenness, the uncovering his nakedness, etc. That's quite a story, and Noah was not happy with him because he went very, very wild and vile after a while. He ended up living in Egypt for a while, and according to a few ancient sources, he began to have problems even there. He was practicing really, really bad sorcery, and even to them. So eventually, he was ran out of town. And take a guess where he went. Yes, Noah, the compassionate old father that he was, took him in, but this wouldn't be for long because Ham and his entourage was bringing this paganism back into the Italian peninsula and ushered in a lot of moral acts, and Noah, trying to keep the land a land of purity, got upset and banished Ham southward to the island of Sicily. Yet, there seems to be another major player of ancient times, at least as far as paganism and this rebellion against God were concerned, and he had attempted to do much of the same. Cush, that grandson of Noah and originator of the Tower of Babel, seemed to have found himself in a similar predicament just after the tower's fall. Possibly because of what God did to this whole area, chaos entered into the region, and there arose a loathing towards Cush because of what happened. Many started to blame him for the separation of tongues, and he also seemed to come into conflict with his own son, Nimrod. After Nimrod took over the reins of power, he probably found Cush to be a little bit of a liability and decided to write him off. He even got a little hostile towards Cush, and other people did, which made him start to fear for his life. He then needed to hide out for a while. What to do? Where to go? Of course, Noah took him in as well. This time, Cush wasn't as brazen as Ham, trying to usher in these same old pagan ways, at least not until Noah's death. Noah really loved his family. Even though they went so much to the dark side, he always had high hopes, it seems, for them turning around. And in the meantime, Noah was happy to have him there. And Cush did behave himself for a while. But the time was passing, and it would not be too long until Noah finally died. And because Noah trusted Cush so much over these last few years, it was only about 8 or so years, he decided to allow him to rule after he was gone. He granted Noah a plot of land and began constructing a city in his honor. Guess what it was called? Noah seems to have named the city after one of Cush's many avatars or titles, Saturn, with the city being known as Saturnalia. Now, what could that eventually have turned into? Let's take a guess here. First, though, to understand what the Saturn title may have meant, let's get a little backstory on what that all may be about. Beyond Saturnalia being just a pagan festival, and beyond Saturn being just a god of ancient mythology, I found that he was also considered a father god and a god who was thought to be hidden. If we think about this title being similar to a title of a pharaoh or pope, we can assume that there could have been a number of Saturn gods out there in these ancient pagan times. Cush, as many may already know, was this father god of Nimrod, hence the title, and that great pagan rebel. He was also considered a hidden sage over time because, for one reason at least, he had to hide out in Babylonia during these times of persecution. So as we see, Cush could have easily been one of these Saturn gods, hence the namesake behind that city of Saturnalia. And what did the city become known as? Of course, Rome. Talk about being in a class by yourself and having some of the power hitters helping your establishment. It's interesting to see that there's actually a remnant of Saturn in Rome. Did anybody see this? The Temple of Saturn? It's pretty intriguing. Yeah, I actually went there too and I saw it. It's right in the middle of the city, it seems. So paganism began to incorporate Cush as a major god there. And now Rome seems to be on her way down with these new influential powerhouses. Of course, there were other empires in place a long time before Rome had ever been a major stronghold. But because of people like Zepho, Ham, and Cush, the city slowly changed and eventually became a pagan and Edomite powerhouse of world influence and domination. To continue, we need to jump over to a few books of prophecy in the Bible. Let's look at Daniel and Revelation here a little bit. Not my fortes, but I still use them in the books that I write. So we'll see what they may say about Rome here. The Bible stated that in the future there will be 2 beasts, each with 7 heads, that will influence many and vie for command and control over the earth. These beasts will also help push the world into the end times of the Antichrist, in my view. So they must have been and still are huge modems of influence. So let's look at what the two might be and what the number 7 may mean to both of them. Over the years, many learned people, scholars, what have you, have generated their own opinions on this. And I'm sure most of you have probably got your own opinions and thoughts and studied this very early on. So it's good to be actually looking at it one more time to kind of hope we get some commonality in thought here, at least in my opinion, I hope. There's probably a lot of differences to what I'm about to say here, though, but I'm sure there's some similarities as well. First, according to my research, I believe that the Bible refers to a beast as more or less symbolic of an animal. That's pretty straightforward, right? But I believe it also could represent a person or system who on occasion may act quite unsavory or even beast-like. They may preach a good game. They may sound moral at first on the surface. They may speak a lot of humane or compassionate things, but on the inside are as dead men's bones. Their ideological words may even be pagan at its core. From these foundations, they slowly may be able to bring someone more towards the same immorality as an animal or a beast might practice. As I've stated in my volumes that pagan elements, I believe, actually originated with Cain and the serpent way back around the times of the Garden of Eden. And Cain did act very beast-like, especially when he went to murder his brother. And if you think about it, let's look at just a couple of ways that these pagan religions and people behaved in the past when allowed to go unabated. I mean, we have the ancient Mayans and Aztecs, sacrificing humans on the top of pyramids, tearing their hearts out, whatever. We have the Druids throwing people alive in the big weave baskets, setting them on fire just so they can look at their entrails and get elements of the future. And of course, we have the ancient Babylonians and Romans throwing followers of God into the lion's den for mere sport. So these two beasts that we're talking about then, the beast of the sea and the beast of the earth, will have their skeletal differences. The two may operate in different ways with different MOs, but they are both, I believe, part of the same system of pagan control and manipulation. And I also believe both part of the same city. Let's look at the first example, the beast that comes out of the sea. Well, what is the sea exactly? I believe, according to the book of Revelation, they already provided us an answer. The waters which thou sawest are people and multitudes and nations and tongues. In other words, it seems pretty clear to me that this beast deals with the sea of people out there. Everyday people living out their everyday lives, people coming together, forming into groups and nations with leaders. And if we think about it, we do have a political sphere out there which may be related to this on certain levels. In the past, we did have groups of people forming into individual nations as well, and empires. So, what if we begin to assume that there could be a political beast here in Revelation and see what happens, see how it transpires. And if we do go through with this supposition, we may be able to see that some patterns and that they are emerging here. Many of us may also know that there are two human beasts in the book of Revelation as well. Each beast-like system has a man corresponding to it. And as far as this beastly man and system in the political sphere, we have him called the beast or the Antichrist. Pretty simple. Everybody knows, most people know. Well, I believe that this political beast has 7 heads because it represents a force that over time held political sway over or exercised authority over or strived to have dominion over one particular nation, and that would be Israel. And these attempts were carried out over at least 7 different eras of time. Most of us probably agree that this 7-headed beast, no matter what it was, would have been the antithesis of all that the children of Israel stood for. And of course, why? A member of the Israeli nation would go on to be the Messiah, and Christianity would also spring from him. They're moral enemies. So there would be major attempts by pagan systems here to stop this ship from sailing, or at least slow it down some. So in pure political fashion, I believe that each head represented a political head of state or empiric system that came across Israel over the years. Each were antagonistic towards Israel and tried to take it over, most of them being successful. All of this should hopefully make a little more sense as we move on here. But let's look at the first political head, for example. We know there's a Bible story about Joseph, one of Jacob's sons, and how he was eventually sold into slavery by his 11 brothers into the land of Egypt. We know how he became successful in this land, and the rest of Jacob's sons began to experience famine where they lived. So they relocated to Egypt as well. And all the children of Israel thrived there, at least for a time. On top of this, most of us also know the story of the Ten Commandments. The descendants of these 12 tribes of Israel were eventually subdued by an evil Pharaoh and taken slaves. Here we go. I believe Egypt could now be head number one. After holding the upper hand over Israel for long periods of time, the people, as most of us know, eventually were freed by God and left. But entered the Assyrians a number of years later, who took away the 12 tribes of a divided Israel and subjected them. Head number two. Since this time, the descendants of Israel were influenced or taken back captive by other political heads of state. Next, we had the Babylonians under King Nebuchadnezzar, taking away the last two tribes. This, of course, is where the book of Daniel comes on the scene and gives us more solid evidence, I believe, that this sea peace is actually political. Now we have the story of Daniel and the king's dream. Daniel interprets this dream for Nebuchadnezzar and says that there would be 4 empires since his time that would come and have some kind of sway over Israel. This current Babylon would be head number 3, and we have Media/Persia, Greece, and Rome. There's the 4. So we're on our way, it seems, with 6 heads. But what about the 7th? We understand that by the time Revelation was written in the 1st century AD, Rome had already had its chance to influence the land and dominate Israel, being that 6th and present head. A verse in Revelation, though, seems to give us more about what could have happened since this time. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is. This verse seems to state how 5 of these former pagan kings had already fallen, and there presently is 1 now, which of course is the Roman king. Also, this seems to help, in my view, prove that this beast is political, because we have kings and empires and governments over the people. And as one might notice, all of these seem to be pagan at every opportunity. Now, why would this be important? Well, it seems that through this, we can have an unbroken chain of people, power, and theology here, trying to undermine everything that God may have wanted for Israel, his nation. This is the unbroken force of suppression, which I believe in. Merriam-Webster actually defines paganism as those who practice a religion other than Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. And because all 3 of these beliefs at least seem to point towards their God as being the God of Abraham, it could be fairly easy to assume that paganism stood for practically everything else, everything religious out there almost. And through this continual umbrella of pagan influence and control, all of these political empires then, in my view, could be considered related, part of the same one beast system. Many of us might know that each empire absorbed the elements of the previous empire that they conquered, adopting their gods, celebrating the same holidays, etc. And maybe by the time pagan Rome came onto the scene, she considered herself the top dog here, the final empire by which the rest of the world could come to and suckle off of. It's interesting to note that another origin of the name Rome could come from a word rum, which means teat. And yes, this teat of power and ideology could easily be connected to, as one source put it, the theoretical reference to the totem wolf that adopted and suckled the cognate named twins. This depiction was thought to be representative of Rome's founding, a wolf adopting 2 human babies named Romulus and Remus. Quite opposite, it seems, of anything godly out there, like sheep or lambs. Isn't it funny how so many elements here, in my opinion, seem to tie together? So let's discover what the seventh head in this line of pagan empires could be known as. As we look a little further into the verses of Revelation, we see, "And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is. The other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed." Now, just what might these mean? Simply, I believe that this 7th head at the time of John represented the head that had not come yet, but will rise again later on in history. In other words, my view, it will be related to Rome. It'll appear as a political authority, once wounded as if it were dead, but will rise again and come back to life as if it were healed. So if the 6th head, according to the book of Daniel, was the Roman Empire, then the 7th head would not come into fruition until long after this head was dead and gone. The original Roman Empire is long gone, yet it's interesting to see that in 1957, Rome began to take center stage once again with the establishment of the EEC. The European Economic Community was established as a forerunner to the EU. This allowed countries in the area to become unified once again for various reasons. This treaty was the first of a series of treaties. And funny, there does seem to be, at least in my mind, a reunification, at least in part, of countries that were once part of the old Roman Empire. So in a way, there does seem to be an empire coming back to life here, in a way. And with the establishment here of the EEC, it started with a treaty. And yes, it was called the Treaty of Rome. Go figure. So, if this regrouping was indeed the 7th head, we know that when he cometh, he must continue a short space. All of these European treaties have not been ratified for very long. It's a far cry from the many hundreds of years that other empires on our list may have survived for. So moving on a little further, we see that the Bible also states that there could have been 10 horns or kings possibly coming out of this future European conglomerate. Now, just who might they be? Many theologians have stated that the world at the time of Antichrist would be divided into 10 zones. And I heard this too. It makes sense, and it's very interesting. Also, if we think about it though, most will understand that there were more than 10 countries entering into these European treaties. Today, there's quite a few more than just 10. So now what? But if there are 10 kings somewhere related to what I'm saying here, maybe there's something promising to this effect in the Bible. Let's continue on. "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have not received kingdoms as yet, but received power and kings 1 hour with the beast." We already know how the 7th head could have been this revived Roman Empire, a conglomerate of European nations, eventually ending up as the EU. Yet now we see there will be another conglomerate forming out of this, an 8th. And when this happens, my view, it seems that these 10 kings may be known. Well, just what might have come out of the European Union in this way already? Actually, there was another conglomeration of countries that banded together and emerged from the EU. And this happened when countries took it upon themselves to have a united currency. This further amalgamation formed into a group known as the Eurozone, which began around early January of 1999. And by the time their monetary unit, the euro, was launched, Greece had already stepped in and adopted it as well. Well, one might say, okay, yeah, that's okay. There were 12 nations, though, however, that first got together here, so something might be a little off, right? But it's interesting to note that 10 out of these original 12 were members of the original Roman Empire. Yes, out of all of these, Ireland and Finland were never really subjected to Rome's authority. So if we think about it, we do have 10 kings emerging out of the 7th Roman head and becoming another unified entity. The 8th could easily be underway already. Along with this, Daniel seems to state that this final conglomerate, by which would eventually comprise 10 kings, would be held together by clay. And as the toes of the feet were of part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partially strong and partially broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with merry clay, they shall not cleave one to another, not even as iron not mixed with clay. Can't you picture nations coming together here, but not wanting to give up their own sovereignties? It seems like there could be 10 former nations, former Roman nations, uniting together at once here, staying together, but not concretely. The EU and Eurozone treaties have much of this same consistency, in my opinion. They hold nations together, but often it's fragile at best. They don't become one super nation. And look what happened with Brexit a little while ago. We've gathered information about the political beast here, the beast of the sea, and we are also told that there is another beast with 7 heads, another system and a man that manifests itself as another system of influence, the beast of the earth. I totally believe, as we'll see, this beast manifests itself in the world of religion. Now, why would it be called the beast of the earth then? What does earth have to do with religion or spiritual belief? They may sound a little unrelated at first, but yet as we begin to dig deeper and think of things a little more esoterically, the earth could be related to religion and spiritual belief here. If we think about it, a lower earth or being beneath the earth could in ways be comparable to a person who desires lower things in this world or has a lower moral code or wants to be apart from God. Being in the lower world could also signify a soul that's been imprisoned in Sheol or Hades, the darkness of the deep, what have you. It makes sense in this certain esoteric way in respects. Contrasting this on the other extreme, those who often seek after higher things could be considered one who strives for loftier ideals or has a higher moral code, etc. They want to be closer to the heavens or to God. Along these same esoteric lines, higher points on earth then could suggest something of the same. Traditionally, if a person wanted to be closer to God, they may go up to a mountain or a high point on earth. God even had his high place on Mount Sinai. The Watchers, as many of us know, went up and down Mount Hermon, utilizing this mountain as their route to and from heaven. Even pagan mythologies have mimicked this concept, calling the high place of their gods Mount Olympus. So the prophet Enoch, as one of the most enlightened individuals of the antediluvian world, seemed to have affinity for that which was of higher elevation. Unto Enoch thou gavest one part, which was dried up the 3rd day, that he should dwell in the same part, whereas are 1,000 hills. While being persecuted, he was even also said to go and retreated up into a mountain. And if we really think about it, even Cush was an instigator of a man-made mountain, the Tower of Babel. This is the place where people wanted to ascend up to reach God and to overthrow him. So if the earth, especially a stacked or elevated earth, could have this esoteric relationship to all things higher or more spiritual, then maybe the beast of the earth could work in a plateau that may stand for something higher or more spiritual as well. And if we recall, the man at the helm of this beast is considered the false prophet. So here we go. I've already mentioned about the 2 beasts being a little different in regards to how they go about their seduction and their leadership, but I believe the 2 are connected to this one city of Rome. Revelation states that, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. In other words, this false prophet would be very knowledgeable in what's related to religious study, I believe. He will act as innocent as a lamb and say wonderful things, but in actuality, he may also include elements of pagan and secular humanism into the rhetoric, things that God abhors. They may equate to something that the serpent, the ultimate dragon, might say as well, if he were speaking, don't you think? So look what he did to Eve in the garden. Horns in the past have also often symbolized power. And from my writings, Cush was symbolized often as a god with 2 horns, while his son Nimrod with 1. Two horns on a god, I believe, often stood for an individual who had superior knowledge and authority, or who existed for a fairly long period of time. You can call him a wiser father figure type of god in pagan lore. The one-horned gods could be thought of as individuals who had a little bit less of a wisdom or haven't been around as long as some others. You could think of them as sons or junior gods. With this understanding, we may be able to understand this false prophet could have been considered a superior father figure to many. We also see he that in his religious system were said to have backed the final authority of this political beast. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them that dwell in to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. So what we take out of this is there's a church or a religious system that will be riding atop of whatever political authority is around them, promoting their same ways. Does that sound familiar? Sound like a lot of the same going on today? And also, as far as the seven heads of this beast are concerned, we see that in Revelation. He carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting upon a scarlet-colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having seven heads. This verse is a little telling. An angel is about to leak some information to John. It compared the corrupted Antichrist system of the earth here to a woman with a few questionable morals. But as churches, as many of us know, have often been called holy mothers, brides of Christ, etc. So haven't they? The angel then elaborates a little more on this religious beast. And the angel said unto me, I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, that hath the seven heads. The seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman sitteth. It's interesting that Rome, in my opinion, is one of the only modern city that's positioned on seven hills. And in ancient times, it was the only one, surely. On top of this, there's another Bible verse that elaborates more on this woman and her seven heads, making her identification as clear as day. And the woman with which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. A city? A city that reigns over the kings of the earth? Who was in charge of John's world at the time? Yes, there was indeed a political empire named after a city in John's day. There was also a contemporary treaty named after the city, reuniting former lands recently. And as most of us know, there is a major religion named after the city. Rome, in my opinion, is the only city that fits this bill exactly. And if the political system of the old Roman Empire has been revived via a string of treaties that eventually formed into the EU, then logic tells us this Church of Rome could also be a part of it, supporting it. Sad to say. And it's also interesting to see that there are seven mountains. The seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman sitteth. Mountains again. We've already discovered a possible connection between high places on earth, hills, etc., and the spiritual or religious world. And it's also interesting to note here that another possible origin of the name Rome could be from a word that meant top, summit, or hill. Go figure. Yes, the more we think about things, the more I believe Rome to be a perfect candidate for whatever striving to be a political and religious leader in subtle Antichrist causes, at least in my mind. We also see one more thing in the book of Revelation. And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast. The color red was not only associated with ancient flags of the Roman Empire, but it also was the color of Esau and Edom. As one might know, the name Edom comes from a word meaning red. And Esau, of course, was the brother known for having that famous woolly red hair. To me, it all seems to be related here. What other setup and what other systems do we have in place already like this, according to Revelation? And what other city do we have that seems to fit this exact scenario? Reflecting again, I concluded that paganism originally came from the ancient serpent and Cain, way back around the time of the Garden of Eden, and went from there. And with the saying that all roads lead to Rome, we have to ask ourselves, do they, in a pagan Antichrist sense? The entire Roman city and empire, ancient and modern, may have even felt entitled of all that pagan majesty that they were that they were, just because of who they were and their history. And they were so used to being on top of everything for so long. Who knows? Now, with all this information, I believe that we should be cautiously looking out for whatever might come out from this part of the world. The political, economic, and religious theologies that ooze out of this Western European stronghold. I believe we need to take and see the two seven-headed beasts for what they really are. We need to watch out for what these forces push and what they might actually want out of our United States. It's always interesting to me, off the cuff here, when I was growing up, we always had to convert to the metric system, and it's just, I'm like, okay, why? I mean, I like the English system that this country's been using, but it always seems that even in the books that I would read as a youngster, they would always say, as we prepare to adopt the Western European model and blah, blah, and go that way. I just wondered, why are we so in a hurry to adopt that which comes out of Europe? It just, for me, it was confusing when I was a child. So, question these non-elected governmental and humanitarian agencies. Beware of what agencies such as the World Economic Forum under that infamous globalist Klaus Schwab might want to see happen to our world. I believe that's where all the problems really are going on. Hopefully this discussion will help bring us unification, at least in a Christian perspective, and might erase a few of the doubts that might accompany the seven-headed beast and the city of Rome. Thank you. Thank you.
Got a few minutes for some questions.
Okay. Anybody? Well, I got the man I'm talking to now.
Yeah, no, not really a question, just a request. Could you expound just a little bit on the logo you have up there?
That, from what I understand, is an ancient Roman flag, and it's red. And oh, you got your right. You got your leaves that go in with the unification. I like it. Yes, the laurel.
Bull horns, the two horns with stylized sundisk in the middle.
There you go.
Yeah,
Good
got
comment.
a stylized pyramid in there of the secret societies.
Yes. See,
They've got
he's
a lot
got
of
it.
stuff in there.
Right, and we see it's coming through Rome, Roman Empire. They feel entitled, in my opinion, since way back when. Anybody else? I don't know. I'm honest. I just grabbed it. I grabbed it. Would you know what those letters meant?
No, I've not studied those letters, but they will be Latin.
Yeah, they're Latin for sure, but I don't really know exactly what they mean. It was just to show the color red on the Roman flags. Hi, yes.
So the Pope Francis, you feel is the A? How does that correlate with? Is he the last? Is he involved in it?
Well, as I was talking about, the beast of the earth and the religious beast, and talking like a father, Pope means father, right? I mean, and he's. And some of the things that, and again, I don't mean to be disparaging against anybody. It's the system, the corrupt systems that are issues, not the people, in my opinion. So you just have to kind of watch out for what we're being fed sometimes, and what we see in the Bible, because I believe that, I hear a lot of humanistic things coming out of him, and secular things, and that's kind of alarming me quite a bit, because from what I've researched and found, if we think about it, man's religion is the ultimate travesty to God. Okay, that's what's been going on ever since Judges, where every man did what was right in his own eye. And that's basically, it's carried on, and it's carrying on today. So it's almost like a religion of the secularist.
So do you feel like that he is the false prophet of the Revelation?
Again, you put the pieces together. I could say that, but it just seems, I don't know if it's him, but whoever may stand in those shoes, sometime maybe in the future if you get another one. But it just seems to me that whoever's leading the Church of Rome, if they're leading them down these ways, right? And whoever's leading the Church of Rome at the time, and bringing them down these same ways to say, oh, follow the political beast here, follow what's going on in the EU and the UN and etc. That's alarming to me.
We have a question back here.
Okay.
Hey, Brett, just wanted to see if you could expound upon the connections of Israel with the seed of promise and Rome with Edom. Because
Edom?
even though Esau was a child and part of the seed of promise, he disdained his birthright. And so he's considered and linked with the children of perdition.
Right. I think Edom cared so little about the birthright that he gave it up for a pot of porridge, beans. I mean, and that's another reason why I think he was known as red, is because the beans were red, from what I found. But I totally agree and understand. The thing I want to say about Esau is, somebody talked to me earlier about Cain and saying that Cain, was a problem because being, in my opinion, seed of the serpent. Okay, you have a physical genetic line there. Okay, Esau had everything he could possibly have as far as the special bloodline of God's creation there. He had Abraham, he had Isaac as his father. Why did he go so bad? And I believe that genetics aren't really the telltale here if you're going to sin or not, or if you're going to be a bad person. It's all up in here. It's all in the decisions that you make. So I believe that Esau had every chance in the world to be a good follower of God, but he got swayed. And I believe this is more of the spiritual corruption of Samael, rather than just saying it's a genetic problem with him. And that's why I believe he started going down a dark path, is because, Samael worked on him a lot to get him to go. But he still made these decisions. He made the decisions to take pagan wives. He made these decisions to not even care about the birthright. He'll just sell it for a pot of beans. The what? I'm sorry? I'm sorry. What? I'm not.
Referring to the scripture in Daniel where it says that he will change the laws and the times, that he would corrupt the calendar,
Oh,
which is Gregorian.
yeah. That I'm not too much into. But after that last one we heard, I think she did a great job. As far as telling us what the truth is, because I am questioning my own calendar myself now. Sorry if I don't have more information for you, but. Oh, wow. Good one. That's good to know. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone?
Got time for one more question. Any takers?
Good, bad? No? Okay. Well, thank you all. I really appreciate it. I feel honored. Thank you very much.